thank you very, very much for coming along today. This is sort of like a lunchtime slot, and we'll be finishing at 1:30. This is from the 6th to the 17th of June. The Green Software Foundation is running its global summit, and that means there are a number of events across the world, organized by participating organizations. Thoughtworks is a member of the Green Software Foundation, and we agreed to organize something in the UK. It is the first time that GSF has done these sort of things, and we were very happy to highlight that we have not just an office in London, but an office in Newcastle and Manchester. And that's why we set up the meetup groups for the Green Software Foundation, one for Newcastle, one for Manchester, but both coming to this joint talk. What will happen today is that we're going to show you a video that lays out what GSF is about. I think it's a useful starting point for everybody to know what GSF is about and what it's trying to achieve. We will then hand over to Jerry McGovern, who is very privileged, very excited to have Jerry speaking. He's a renowned digital waste campaigner based in the Republic of Ireland. He'll introduce himself and speak for about 20 minutes, and then we'll have time for question and answer before we wrap up, and we will finish at 1:30. There is the chat space. Please do put any questions or comments in there, and we can pick them up later once the video and the presentation by Jerry are finished. I don't think I've forgotten anything there. If I have, please jump in and say, my colleagues. But otherwise, I'm going to hand over and we're going to show the video that is presented by Asim Hussain, who is the chair of the Green Software Foundation.
Welcome to this introduction to the Green Software Foundation. My name is Asim Hussain. I am the Executive Director and Chairperson of the Foundation. Now, the mission of the Foundation is to build a trusted ecosystem of people, standards, tooling, and best practices for building green software. And when we talk about green software, we're talking about software which emits the fewest greenhouse gases possible to perform its function. Now, our vision is to change the culture of building software across the global tech industry so sustainability becomes a core priority to software teams, just as important as performance, security, cost, and accessibility. What I'm going to talk to you today about as well, this introduction, I'm going to talk a little bit about the structure of the foundation, why we exist and just how we are structured, a little bit about our progress to date, and some of our projects that we're working on as well. And I'm going to finish with how to get involved if this is something you want to get involved with. So our structure, why we exist and just how we are structured. So the primary reason to join the foundation, the main reason people are joining the foundation is to collaborate with the other members. That's really what the foundation is at its core. Is a method of organizations collaborating together. We have a lot of clarity regarding patent, IP, copyright. We have agreed methods of working for how we will work together, how we will resolve our differences. We have a lot of that structure already provided in the foundation, and so when you join, it's easy to collaborate with other members. Our goal is to build a trusted ecosystem, an ecosystem people can trust. That means that the ecosystem needs to be supported by an organization like the foundation, by funding to ensure that the ecosystem will carry on and you can make processes inside your organization dependent upon that ecosystem. And look, we want there to be an industry around green software. We want there to be a situation where if you train yourself on green software principles and practices, that there are jobs out there for you. That's our goal, is to increase the market size for products and services around green software. We are a sub-foundation from the Linux Foundation. So our parent organization is the Linux Foundation. We gain a lot of knowledge and guidance and structure from the Linux Foundation. But we are our own separate legal entity, and we're structured under 4 working groups. The standards working group focuses on creating standards around green software. The policy working group looks at how do we engage with external bodies, external regulatory forces, what are our policies, what are our positions on certain subjects and topics. That's a policy working group. The open source working group is all about how to grow the ecosystem of tooling. About how do you grow the ecosystem of people. So they focus a lot on things like our summit, global meetup groups, teaching, training, education. That's the community working group. And on top of it all, we have our steering committee, and they provide us with top level guidance, advice. They think about our 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 year plans for growth and strategy. This is our team, so you have a large number of people actually engaged, and there's more people engaged in the foundation. These are just the leaders of the foundation. So we have our steering committee, our administrative team, and our organizational leads. So each organization has an organizational lead. I just want to say for a second, thank you to everybody for being working so hard and getting the foundation to where it is right now. So what has our progress been? What has our progress been over the last year? Who's our membership? So we work very, very hard to ensure that we represent the global software industry. Our members operate in over 190 countries around the world. They have a global workforce of over 1.5 million, and we now have 7 Fortune Global 500 companies inside our membership. And we really put a lot of effort into ensuring that our membership is diverse, is diverse in sector, diverse in geography, diverse in organizational type. And that's one of the ways that we can feel confident when we say that we represent the global software industry. We're growing. Our growth has been phenomenal. So we are now 29 member organizations with a healthy mix of for-profit and non-profit. Later, we're now 29 members. We definitely have filled a long needed niche in this space, and our membership is an indication that we're really going in the right direction. We've come a long way in a year. We launched in May 2021. We took a while to get started. We had our first meeting in July. We grew quickly to 15 members. We launched our blog. The open source working group launched their first project. The trademark policy was the first policy from the policy working group. The manifesto was published from the community working group, and the SCI is our first standard being created by the standards working group. So we've come a long way in a year, and we have some amazing things planned for the next year. Some of our projects that are being run on in the foundation are, well, this global summit. So we're running a global summit. You're probably watching this inside a global summit, and this is spanning the globe. It's running in over 20 locations around the world, physical locations, people meeting up. We have a shared interest in green software, connecting and really becoming the seed for what will become a global network of meetup groups, of local user groups. Our intention is to grow this ecosystem of people and growing a global network of focused user groups of people who share similar interests, who are meeting up our strategies that we are exploring to grow the ecosystem of people who are knowledgeable and care about green software. Measurement was one of the key pain points of our members. A measurement standard, which is called a software carbon intensity standard. This is a way of how to measure or score a piece of software for emissions, for sustainability. And one of the wonderful things that has enabled us to do is to just have a common language regarding software emissions. The SCI is many, many different things, but one of the most powerful things is discussing software emissions, of discussing different architectural choices and how one choice might affect the carbon emissions versus another choice. That's a wonderful thing about the software carbon intensity standards, is providing a standard way of even talking about the subject, but also a standard way of measuring and scoring a software application. And the other big project that we're working on many projects, but another big project that we're working on is green software certification. So this is 101 level knowledge regarding green software. It will take a couple of hours to train for the examination. The certification will be freely available from the Green Software Foundation. The intention is to level set and level up people around the world. Our goal is to have 1 million people completed and taken the certification by the end of 2023. That's another way we're going to grow the ecosystem of people who have knowledge and understanding around green software. So that's it. That was just a quick introduction to the foundation. You can find more information about the foundation on our website, greensoftware.foundation. If you are an employee of one of our member organizations and you want to get involved, go to the Teams page on the website, find your organizational lead, reach out to them, and they will introduce you to the process for getting onboarded into the foundation. If you're not a member of the foundation and you're interested in joining, again, go to our website. There is a Join Us page where you'll find out more information as well as links to help you get started with the application process. Or if you just want to stay in touch and just stay in touch regarding what the work that we're doing, recommend you go to the website and again join our newsletter. And we send a newsletter out every month, and we just let everybody know what are the things we're working on, what are the big things happening in our space and in our industry. So thank you very much and welcome.
Who is a renowned digital waste campaigner. And Jerry's going to talk for about 20-25 minutes, and then we'll have a question and answer session. I say we've had to unfortunately disable the chat function, so please hold your questions for once Jerry has finished. Thank you. Jerry, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Billy. Is my screen sharing? Hopefully it is. Can you just tell me? I just want to verify that it's sharing, Billy.
Yes, you're sharing, Billy.
I'm sharing. Okay, good. Okay, so this is Mount Everest, and Mount Everest has a mass of about 150 billion tons of rock and other material. And in 1970, we were extracting from the earth somewhere between 25 and 30 billion tons of material. And by 2020, that had grown to 100 billion tons. And it's estimated that if we keep going the way we're going, by 2050, we'll be extracting 170 billion tons of material. So a Mount Everest every year of material dug out of the earth. It's simply not sustainable, and 90% of this is waste. And a lot of the growth is actually driven by technology, building new technologies. Electric vehicles are 4 times more mining and mineral intense than traditional vehicles. In fact, digital technology creates somewhere in the region of 99.9% waste to create a laptop or a smartphone because of the purity of the materials required and the massive range of materials that are required in extremely small quantities. So a typical smartphone these days could have something like 55 to 60 different minerals, different mined materials in it. What is driving a lot of the technology, the new technologies, the purchase of servers, etc., is the growth of data. So data is coming up to an exponential tipping point in the globe. Probably by about 2025, we're going to hit real crisis points when it comes to data. Back in 2010, it was estimated there were about 2 zettabytes of data. So a zettabyte of data, to get some sense how big a zettabyte of data is, I calculated how many trees we would have to cut down to get enough paper to print 1 zettabyte of data. And just 1 zettabyte of data would require the paper from 20 trillion trees. So there's only 3.5 trillion trees left on the planet. So there's no possibility we could print out a zettabyte of data. And by 2020, it was estimated we were at 64. The previous estimate said about 47, but they had to upscale those estimates. By 25, 180. By 2030, 612. Over 2,000 zettabytes of data by 2035. This is not sustainable. We are creating vastly too much data at an extraordinary increasing speed, a 28% annual growth rate, which is an exponential growth rate, and 90% of it is crap. 90% of it is useless. Basically, only 5% of data is actively managed after 90 days. So we have this huge capacity to create very low level data that is driving the massive growth in data centers, the massive growth in all sorts of other technologies that are having a tremendous stress on the planet. Technologies that last for 2 or 3 years, computers or otherwise, that are then not recycled. Less than 20% of digital devices are recycled. And even those that are recycled, we generally can get back less than 30% of the oil in those devices because they're designed the ways they're actually designed. So if we could slow the growth of data, we could also slow the growth of technology. So apps and software, etc. in the process, it's the same. 90% of apps are not being used after 90 days. Only 5% are in active use after 90 days. So we have in our technological industry, which I've been involved in since the early 90s, a tremendous capacity to create things. But often many of these things are of very low value. So if we could consider more before we actually create and question more, do we need this feature? Do we need this app? Do we need to actually do this? Rather than this constant belief we're on this wonderful world of innovative and we've got to be constantly changing. You can innovate your way towards the apocalypse as well. Innovation is not necessarily a positive environment. Our data centers are built to waste, right? Basically, the buildings are designed to last no more than about 20 years. We used to build buildings that would last thousands and thousands of years. Now we design the cement and the steel. It's only going to last 20 years. These are the buildings. The infrastructure, the mechanical infrastructure lasts somewhere between 15 and 20 years. In a factory, these air conditioning systems, these electromechanical infrastructure would last 40 years. But in data centers, they just last 15 to 20 years. Servers, if you're lucky, will last 3 to 4 years. Most servers are cycled out of data centers within 18 to 24 months. Many of these servers, certainly the hard disks of them, are physically destroyed for security reasons. Perfectly good working systems, physically destroyed. Water demand, a typical data center can demand somewhere between 1 and 5 million liters of water a day for cooling and other sorts of purposes. And these are enormous. This cloud, this great sense that we've sold the world that everything's in the cloud, well, the cloud is very much on the ground. And data centers in Ireland, Ireland is a major center for data centers. In 2015, they were consuming 5% of Irish electricity. Just 6 years later, it had risen to 14%. 14%, 12% is all of rural Ireland, right? So the growth in data centers is phenomenal. And can we slow this down? Because we cannot sustain it over 20 or 30 years. So a lot of what we're producing, or we're creating environments essentially for crap. We create dumps. Most websites are dumps. This is the University of Southampton. 0.2% of the pages get 90% of the visits. Only 4% are visited and 96% are not visited. And that's over something like several million pages they actually have in their overall environment. And this is happening again and again, whether it's to do with features, whether it's to do with content. We create massive quantities of stuff that has very little value. And we need to become much more conscious before we create, rather than saying, let's create as much as we want, let's use as much as we want, and then we'll figure it out later. I remember years ago working with Liverpool, the city of Liverpool, doing a top tasks project. And we found that there was a mapping of the content creation. So when we analyzed the most important tasks to people, we found that the tiny tasks were actually getting by far the most content production, and the top tasks were essentially being ignored in the process. So the internal organization, the more important things were for people, the less time and attention they were spending on them, and the less important things were for people, the more content and the more apps and the more activities were actually being created in the process, because often the ego of the organization resides in these tiny tasks. So they found only a very small percentage of pages out of the 4,000 were getting 85% of the traffic. So this, huge pattern that keeps emerging. The vast majority of stuff that is created in digital has little or no value. It never had any value to begin with, and yet we have created these engines of crap production in the process. 1.8 billion websites estimated around now. 91% of content gets no traffic from Google. It's not even indexed in Google in the vast majority of situations. So we have these environments, these hidden subterranean environments in digital, where we're churning out. And this is what the data centers are. They're essentially data dumps. They're storing these massive quantities of stuff that is actually has an energy cost to create and an energy cost to store in the process, and yet has little or no value. So how do we become much more value conscious in the way we live and the way we work? Because this is hurting the planet. This is hurting, demanding more energy, demanding more resources, demanding more materials from the planet every single year. Websites. As being my particular focus, I built my first website back around 1995. So around 2005, the average website was about 4 megabytes. Then it went up to 0.7 by 2010, by 2015, up to about 2 megabytes. And now, most websites I'm coming across are at least 4 to 5 megabytes in actual size. They don't need to be 4 to 5 megabytes. This reflects not better design, but developer convenience, or content convenience, or content creator convenience. It's not because these websites are better. They've just become bigger and more sluggish, with an awful lot more waste in the process. You could probably see that in that 4 megabyte page, there is probably 80% waste. So what do I mean by waste? Well, it's JavaScript. It's 500 KB of JavaScript when you only need about 20 or 30 KB of JavaScript for that actual page in the process. But we send it all down because it's easier to do that than actually figure out the JavaScript that is actually relevant for that particular page. And oftentimes, the websites that promote the idea of saving the planet most are the worst possible offenders when it comes to good website design. The COP26 website, this is an excellent resource, because the website carbon calculator, if you want to check out how websites are actually performing, it says this COP26 is dirtier than 94% of pages out there, 5.3 grams every time a page is actually downloaded. So in that COP26, it might look beautiful, but in reality, it's a dirty, filthy diesel truck driving around, spewing out fumes. That 9 megabyte page could be 900 kilobytes easily and get exactly what it needs without any visual change in the process. So 9 megabytes, absolutely horrible. So where is a lot of the weight coming from? The HTML, relatively little. CSS, 5%. A lot of times we download packages of CSS. When we only need 10 kilobyte of CSS, we'll send down 300 instead in the process. But it's not a huge area, but there are areas that we can control. Fonts, everyone's gone crazy on custom fonts. Most people can't see the difference. JavaScript can be significant. Particularly because JavaScript is not simply a weight issue, it's a processing issue. It's what happens to the computer or the smartphone after the JavaScript is downloaded. So this is, a look at the images. and so many stupid images that we use, cliche-based, that don't add anything to the environment. So we've gone mad with cliche images. But what's missing from this picture is video. If we look at it from the video impact, we see the scale of, 80% is that videos are extraordinarily intense from an energy point of view. So it's not to say we shouldn't have videos, but we really need to think about video, because video has a major footprint in the digital environment. So we look here, and 8K, 4K, a 4K video at 60 frames per second can be, just 1 minute, can be 400 megabytes. I don't know what an 8K video would actually be. And we can't see 8K. On smaller screens, 2K is more than sufficient. So we're actually creating these features that are damaging to the planet and have no benefit to humans or any other benefit to the environment. And of course, this is affecting download speeds around the world, particularly for poorer people, particularly for people with older phones. For average people, it can, on mobile, it can be up to 27 seconds to download a lot of pages in this day and age in the process. So these design approaches are very exclusionary. And for poor people, the smartphone is their core. It's their only device. For richer people, they've got multiple devices in the process. But for poor people, the smartphone is how they get a job and how they keep their job in the process. So if you're eating into their battery or whatever, you are, possibly denying them that they'll get their message from their boss or whatever, or their scheduling for their next actual job. So there's an increase in, the amount of poor people who have a smartphone only as their poor device. So weight in digital is a tax on the poor. We don't see it because we're privileged to have these really expensive computers with this wonderful broadband. But every year we build websites and applications that deny poor audiences an ability to interact with these environments. JavaScript has gone up tenfold. And in many environments, we don't even need JavaScript in the process. So a real questioning of, do we even need this? Most pages don't even need JavaScript. Really questioning things. Why do we need this? Why are we doing this? Why do we even need the app in the first place? Begin to start questioning rather than just constantly churning out stuff and constantly going for the easiest option. 37% of mobile pages, JavaScript bytes, are unused. That's 80 petabytes of data a month. That's 54 metric tons of waste every month on the web. That's the equivalent of having to plant 37 million trees to deal with that degree of waste just connected with unused JavaScript in the environment. A JavaScript budget should certainly be not more than 350 KB for any web page. I know there's somebody talking about languages in another month or so, a specific talk, but just to know that different languages have different energy impacts. If we said C has an impact of 1, C++, so JavaScript is 4.5 times more energy intensive than C is in the process. So different languages in different environments have different energy impacts, and we need to consider those in the choices that we're actually making in the process. This is a guy, a Dutch programmer, Danny van Kooten, who has a MailChimp, a very popular plugin for WordPress. He made a 20 KB reduction in code in his plugin. Because he has 2 million websites using his plugin, he calculated that his monthly reduction is 59,000 kilograms of CO2 for just making that 20 kilobyte of code. If you have if you're designing for popular environments, then up to 98% of the carbon impact is in the use of your environment, not in the creation of your environment. It's in all those thousands or millions of users laptops where the actual waste is actually occurring. So where you've got a lot of high use, small changes in your code can have a really significant and positive impact on people's behavior. So that'd be the equivalent. I saved almost 6,000 trees every month in relation to having to deal with that carbon impact. So here, we see growth in custom fonts. Yeah, we often don't need these things, and we can get away, but we just want more, we want more, we want more in the process, and it comes with a cost. Even colors have an energy impact. If we look at black, here, the current draw, of 50 red, the white, so choosing your colors now this is getting very, very micro. These changes are not very significant, but they're all part of a larger culture of actually conserving and taking energy seriously, and not just thinking we can waste whatever we want in the process because we're working in digital. Digital has an extraordinarily waste mindset, a culture of waste, a culture we can do whatever we want, whenever we want. We can have as many screens going. A screen can be consuming as much energy as the entire laptop. If you've got a desktop, even if you're not using it, it's still consuming 50% of the energy that it will be consuming even at maximum use. So if you're not using stuff, turn stuff off in the process. And even thinking of choices between HTML and say things like PDF. HTML, I did this test where 1,000 words came out at 39 kilobytes when I did it in HTML. I did the exact same formatted PDF and it was 141 kilobytes. So there are different environments that have different energy impacts. And if we become much more conscious of our impact in digital, I think we can do a lot of very positive things. But if I'd leave you with one thing, even though I've been talking about data a lot, it's hold on to your devices. Most of the damage that occurs in digital occurs in the manufacturing process of the actual device. That's typically where 80% of the damage occurs. So the longer we can hold on to our devices and the more we can delete and not create data, the better we will be doing for the planet and for our future. Thank you very much for listening.
Stupid, but there you go. Thank you very much, Jerry. That was brilliant. A brilliant, provocative, dare I say, challenging analysis of the situation. How are we going to do this now? I think, can people raise, Jill, are you able to see if people want to raise their hands? And I mean, we have removed all the people who are abusive, we think, so we may be okay to put the main function back on. But otherwise, Jill, can you see if anybody wants to raise their hand if there's questions? Any questions out there? Any sort of comments or any challenges to Jerry? Jerry, I would ask you a question. What's the normal reaction you get from people when you say this stuff? Because it does go against a lot of what we think in modern technology. Let's create data. Let's do amazing, exciting things as technologists. In a lot of ways, it feels like you're saying, oh, and perhaps you're not, but we should restrict ourselves. We should control our enthusiasm. How does that go down?
Well, it's a challenge, Billy, because we're not used to this in the technological space, and I think it's something that just was in the back of my head over the years. I used to think, why is there so much junk in the digital environment? I remember once having a chat with somebody senior in Microsoft about, they'd just done an audit of Microsoft.com at that stage, and they had 15 million pages on it at that stage. And he was telling me that 4 million of them had never been visited. And I was thinking, I mean, that's the population of Ireland of pages that nobody has ever looked at. And, think of the amount of energy that went into creating those and the amount of time and meetings, etc. And nobody had ever even looked at them in the process. So I think we have a culture in digital where we just produce. and we just store because it's cheap, and and we just create new features because the competitor has new features. And I think we have to start thinking a lot more than just producing. I think we have a sheen in technology that we're really smart, but I'm not sure we're nearly as smart as we think we are in the process. I think we're great at producing stuff. Whether we're good at actually producing stuff that has genuine value. I mean, 95% of apps not used after 90 days, well, shouldn't that at some stage draw a question? Why did we go to all the effort to create these apps, 95% of which aren't even used after 3 months? Shouldn't we just think? I mean, are we not capable of looking beyond a month and actually saying this isn't going to work? Who on the teams are actually raising objection and saying, are we, we're collecting all this data? I see so many environments flooded by data where people have so much data they can't even begin to analyze it. So if you collect everything, is that clever? I don't think it's clever, and it's certainly not good for the environment.
Okay, thanks, Jill. So do you think that the premise then, Jerry, is that we should be, I mean, are you saying that the premise we work to now is we just think, let's create the data and then sort out what we're going to do with it afterwards? Whereas actually, are you saying that we should do it the other way around, of saying, what data do we want, and look to build just to produce, to generate the data that we actually think we'll need? And then isn't the danger then that you miss out on innovation, though? Because it's sort of, in a way, if you haven't.
But and this word innovation is vastly overplayed. Most innovation is crap. We're not that smart. Most innovation is, I don't want to think, oh, I'd have to make some difficult decisions here. This, I mean, we have innovated our way to the point of extinction of the species. If we look at the last 50 years, humans have done a horrible job. Whatever we've been doing has not been good. So we maybe need to stand back and say, all of this innovation, innovation is moving, 2 tons of SUV, from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. That's innovation, but is it good for the planet? Is it good for the future of life? An awful lot of the stuff that we're actually doing it might be intelligent, but it's certainly not wise.
Fair enough. So you would say work from the premise of creating the data that you're only going to use, rather than...
Well, to at least do an awful lot more thinking, rather than let's hoover up everything in front of us, in the process. Because the vast majority of organizations that I deal with are flooded. They can't cope with the information that they have, with the data that they have. So they've a kind of, in a way, it's given up. And they're hoping that artificial intelligence will figure it out for them. And let me tell you, artificial intelligence is not going to figure it out. There's a number of hands up I see.
Okay, sorry, so I can't see them, so I don't know.
No problem. So we have Natasha, you're unmuted, and I think you were first with your question.
I don't actually have a question, but it's definitely, thank you. First of all, thank you so much, Jerry, for presenting this information and presenting the data. I think it's really helpful to actually see and visualize what it actually means in context of it all. So I really appreciate that. And this is something I've been thinking about for a while, because there's just a couple of examples. And one thing you touched on was about the cloud, and how the cloud is branded in such a way where people think it's like a fluffy thing in the air, and the general population doesn't realize that it's like servers on the ground in giant data warehouses. And so I think there's a bit of a perception that people have that they don't really see where their data is going, and so they don't really understand the context, like the amount of content that they're actually creating and the impact that it has. So I think there's a perception issue that could be addressed, or should be addressed, right? The other thing that it made me think about too, thinking about cloud, is like, as an example, like you mentioned, images being a huge like a source of what's causing a lot of this like data crap, as you've put it, where like people, because people have smartphones and they take lots of pictures, and they before, where it was film, people were very selective of what kind of photographs they were taking. And so when people are taking photographs, that is something that is not being understood as far as how much is being generated. And like Apple, when they have this cloud service, and you can you can buy a certain amount of drive space to actually sync your cloud data. That, I guess what I'm trying to get, my point is there could be ways around how people understand data. And in that example, it's almost like monetizing it to say, but that doesn't necessarily solve the problem, but it just got me thinking about all these
those are great points, Natasha. And but see, that's their business model. They want us to create crap.
Exactly.
That's how they, like, we took 1.4 trillion photos last year. We took more photos last year than in the entire 20th century. And we're now storing somewhere between 9 and 10 trillion photos in the cloud. So, and the vast majority of them will never be gone back to, but we'll be paying for them for the next 20 or 30 years, because we won't delete. We've taken so many photos. I mean, there's a service in the United States of big photo curators, who actually come into families and curate the photos, because the families are taking so many photos, they can't possibly figure out what are the good ones. So but that's happening in every single area, and that's a deliberate strategy by big tech, because big tech makes a lot of money out of crap.
Yeah, and that's where the crux of the problem lies. Yeah. I don't want to take up all the space. Click and see their hands, but thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Natasha. Great point.
We've got Stuart next with a question.
Hi, Jerry. That was a fabulous talk. It was always fun listening to you. So just to sort of build a little bit on what Natasha was saying, I think on the basis of that talk, I think everyone bears some degree of individual responsibility for all this in terms of the actions that you can take to kind of to mitigate some of this kind of waste. But I mean, and forgive me, I may have missed it, but are you prepared to sort of name and shame the domains or industries that are amongst the worst offenders? Because immediately what springs to mind when you talk about digital crap is like the ad tech industry, which has also been significantly proven to be of no business value whatsoever. It's not even effective, the digital kind of crap. So in terms of where to focus one's attention to kind of bring about change, where would you suggest?
Well, I think you've mentioned a really interesting one there, Stuart. I mean, if you look, the biggest quote unquote technology companies in the world are not technology companies, they're advertising companies. I mean, Google is an advertising company, Facebook is an advertising company. If you define a company by their business model, they're advertising companies. So in essence, we have advertising companies who happen to use technology in the process. And it is this advertising that is driving the superficial wants in the economy. I mean, I was talking to somebody yesterday in France, and they were saying France has set targets of 40% energy reduction over the next 20 to 30 years to meet their environmental targets. It's not about, new technologies, and more energy. We have to consume less energy. So how do we really all play our part to have a great life? And we can, with much less energy. I love technology. I love my phone. I love my laptop, but I want my laptop now to last 20 years. And there are movements here of, where we can become part of the right to repair movement or whatever, and not become, refuse to become. We have moved from being consumers to being devourers of the planet. So whatever we can consciously do to actually not create and to really think before we make decisions about writing code or sending down JavaScript or choosing images. And it's not about never having images, but I think it's that we need to make a much more conscious decision not to get drawn in by the manipulation. The whole infrastructure of technology right now is an advertising propaganda infrastructure to get us to consume as quickly as possible, as much as possible, that will have the shortest life cycle as possible. We must break that cycle. Thank you, Stuart.
And so next we have Adam with a question. Adam Coles.
Hi, yeah, thanks. That was an excellent presentation. Quite shocking in some ways. I guess I worry about it. Like, it sounds like you're coming from an individual point of view of what we can do as individuals, and what we've seen is like that there's been this effort very much to push the onus onto individuals when it comes to things like recycling and home energy use and things like this. But it really can only have a very limited impact unless the real costs are borne by the people doing this. So what I'm wondering is like how that can be pushed. I think most the general population, this is hardly understood by anybody even in the tech industry, never mind in the general population. And they're the ones that are unwittingly consuming all of this, and everything is obfuscated. The real costs of this are completely obfuscated because everybody's on unlimited data packages and unlimited storage and all these sort of things, where it just seems obscenely cheap to do these things. And if what you're saying is true, then that needs to change in a very short period of time. So what can we, I don't know if from the Green Software Foundation point of view, whether that can help to drive these things within the big industries, those tech companies, those advertising companies, if you like, that you've been talking about.
No, I think you're 100% right there, Adam. In the, this is what happened to the plastics in the 70s. It was individualized, in the process. So the individual can do nothing, but the right to repair movement has had a huge impact. Even though Apple has tried to destroy it and many other intensely tried to destroy the right to repair movement. But when we come together as a movement, we can really do things. I think the only change will occur at a societal level. The big brands are making too much money out of this, and the governments are too scared by the big brands. But the government can get courage if they see the society changing. So the society has to drive this. Individuals on their own are and it's this. And I'm sorry that it did come across a bit like that. The individuals are to blame here. There's a huge manipulation matrix on top of us, and so the right to repair movement, I think, is a tremendously positive, and open source reuse. The whole culture of, we have an open source environment, reuse of materials, reuse of code, etc. So there are certain cultural foundations that have remained peripheral somewhat over the last 20 or 30 years that I think we must bring central. That we are not just a cool programmer only if we create stuff. We are also a great programmer if we found code to reuse. If we're a great programmer if we share our code and other people reuse it in the process. We need these cultural changes, but we need to work together. We cannot achieve anything as individuals. It is too unitary. But so if any of us really believe this stuff, we must become part of a movement, because I think the only real change will come from societal movements first, and that'll give the politicians courage to act. And then I think a lot of the big brands will be a kind of relieved, that they have to change in the process. Thank you, Adam.
And then we have a question from Elena.
Yes. Hi. Thanks, Jerry. That was really interesting. I've recently read Sustainable Web Design by Tom Greenwood, and a lot of the things that you mentioned touch upon some of that those topics, and it's really interesting. And I suppose, my question is a continuation from all the other questions, really. And what I'm thinking is, there's 40 of us, and probably many of us work for organizations that are really ultimately driven by profit. And I personally don't subscribe to this model, but, often profit is generated by producing crap, because we just have to go with what the client wants, and if as long as they pay, that's all good. And I just feel like sometimes there's actually a lot of people who don't necessarily care so much for the environmental argument. Like, they just think about the here and now, and the profit that we need to generate right now, and that kind of long-term perspective is lost a little bit. So my question is, how do we make this argument that we believe in something that people who don't necessarily care about the environment want to adopt?
Yeah, now, I mean, it's a core question, Elena, and I really don't know. You see, you don't know the moment. I don't think Greta Thunberg thought, when she was, that person, going outside of the Swedish parliament and demonstrating, that she would start a movement, but you have to do it. I think, that raise your voice. Sometimes, even politely questioning, do we really need to do this? Do we, is this, the last app we did, it didn't work, or, I think sometimes we're too acquiescent. And of course, it's a balancing act of, you don't want to get yourself in trouble. You don't want to be seen as a troublemaker. But I think we need to be the boy who says the emperor has no clothes, because in a huge number of situations they don't, and we're in these ridiculous situations. I have sat in so many analytics meetings in the last 20 years, which is, analytics theater of people trying to figure out, looking all this data, visitors to the website. Nobody has a clue what they're talking about, and nothing useful comes out of those meetings, but they happen every Monday or every second Monday, and nobody says, why are we doing this? Why do we even collect this analytics? We don't even use it properly. No, oh, the bounce rate went up, or, we've had more visitors this week than last week, or most of the data is actually rubbish. It might have a pattern, but the pattern doesn't mean anything. And just questioning, why is 20 people in the room talking about analytics for the last 3 years, and we've never made one useful decision in the last 3 years? Maybe somebody should say that at a meeting now and then.
I think we're going to have to finish it there. I think, can we all agree? Oh, Eleanor's got, are you clapping, Eleanor? So, okay. Can we all give a big round of applause, please, to Jerry for a very stimulating, provocative presentation? Great stuff, Jerry. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And apologies to everyone for what happened here. Horrible. But we dealt with it, and we didn't let them stop us. What is the important thing? We kept going, and that's what matters, I think.
Yeah, and I agree totally. Yeah, again, apologies, and very upsetting for everybody. I'm upset by it, but we just have to carry on. Why people do it, God only knows. Let's just to confirm with everybody, we will message you further about people who've signed up to the Green Software Foundation Manchester and Newcastle groups, to let you know what's happening next. Very much. Unless anybody wants to say any last comments, we'll call it quits there. Thank you for staying with us. Thank you to everybody involved. Thank you to Jerry, and I hope you have a good day. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.